this is not the answer I thought I was going to say when I was going into this test. But my personal opinion, after looking at all the pros and cons and features and boil times and efficiency,
Welcome to the Hunt Backcountry podcast, presented by Exo Mountain Gear. This podcast and the gear that we produce at Exo Mountain Gear share the same purpose: to make you a more capable, confident, and successful backcountry hunter. Straight to the point, no fluff, and no BS. This show is all about providing you with valuable information from experienced hunters. To learn more about the podcast or about our backcountry hunting packs, please visit exomountaingear.com. Well, thank you for joining us for episode 90. This episode is another in-depth gear review, this time looking at backpacking stoves. So hopefully you've caught episode 89, where Steve and I dove deep and discussed 5 different headlamps, the pros and cons, made some comparisons, and then ultimately gave our opinion and described what we will be taking into the field. That was headlamps. We're doing the same thing in this episode with backpacking stoves. We have offerings from Jetboil, MSR, GSI, Optimus, and more. Gonna talk about a bunch of stuff. Hope you guys are excited to get to it. This one's even probably a more controversial, more opinionated discussion than headlamps. Guys certainly have preferences in stoves. Before we get into the show, I want to give a shout out to M. Warner, who left us a review on iTunes, said that he's enjoying that show. You guys, there's over 500 reviews in iTunes right now, which is amazing. We crossed that 500 review mark. So cool to see the interaction and get the feedback from you guys. It's because of you guys that we keep doing this. It's because of things like reviews that we can keep doing this. So if you're enjoying the show, please leave us a review. And M. Warner, please send us your shipping information. We want to get some swag headed your way. We know, as you mentioned, that you're actually deployed, which brings up a good reminder that we want to send out for everybody. If you're interested in any Exo Mountain Gear product, and you're a military member, law enforcement, firefighter, any full-time first responder or service member, please shoot us your information. We would love to set you up with a discount code if you happen to be in the market for a pack or any Exo Mountain Gear accessories. Also, real quick, speaking of accessories, want to let you guys know that the dry bags are out. I know that some of you have been waiting. It took a little bit longer than we were hoping for, but we wanted to make sure that we did it right. And we did it right, and now it's here. So go check out the dry bags if you guys have been waiting. We want to get them to you in time for your seasons and for opening day of your hunts. Also, this show is brought to you by First Light. They're huge supporters of what we do. We are huge supporters of what they do. Not only the gear that they provide us, but for the stance that they take on hunting and conservation. If you guys haven't checked out any First Light gear, there's so many options, and obviously you can drop a lot of money when you get into technical clothing like First Light, but I would start where First Light started and check out some of their merino wool base layers. They're just phenomenal. I mean, I've been using them for years. Can't imagine using anything else. So if you're new to the game, if you're new to First Light or new to merino, I highly recommend that you go check out a merino wool top as a base layer and see how just versatile and effective it is. Okay, as always, if you have any other questions, comments, or feedback, we want to hear it. Shoot us an email to podcast@exomountaingear.com. And thank you guys so much for tuning in. Here's the discussion on the stove review. All right, so Steve, talking stoves. It was funny, we ended up spending an hour to talk headlamps, so we'll see how this goes. But first things first, I guess it would be kind of helpful before we dive into specifics, just to kind of lay out our history, maybe with some products, and then kind of our use case for stoves. Because obviously, like most products, we're not only looking at how does it perform maybe in general, but how does it perform, in our needs. Like our opinions are coming into this for sure. So, just with that in mind, what comes to mind for you?
As far as history goes, I went from, I think I had a Brunton, and it's been, 8 years ago. So I think, forgive me if I get this wrong, a Brunton Raptor stove. And it's just kind of traditional, stove, screw on canister, had 3 little legs that folded out. And and it was fine, right? I mean, it worked. It boiled water. It took forever. When it was windy, it kind of sucked. I used to pack a little sheet of aluminum foil that I kind of folded over a couple times to make a windscreen, and I made it work. And then I think this is probably the first or second year of Jetboil. Lenny had one, and I remember looking at the weight specs and the size of it and going, man, that thing's twice the size, and it's definitely heavier than what I'm using. And then after hunting one season with them, I went and bought one because it was just like, holy crap! All right, it's more than just a stove, right? It does, turns into your coffee mug. How it integrates and the stove attaches to the pot. You can, it's way harder to tip it over, and it was just crazy fuel efficient. And then, more than anything, boiled water very, very fast. So since 2010, I guess probably for me, I've been using a Jetboil. And I've had probably unfortunately for this review, I have the Soul titanium version, which they don't make anymore, which is a giant bummer, and because I think that's a great stove. So, and then as use case, I boil water. I make coffee and I boil water. Those are the two things. So coffee is just heating up water and pouring a Starbucks Via packet into it. And then I boil water for Mountain House, or on the rare occasion I pack a top ramen or something like that. So from my purposes, like simmering, being able to, if you're doing some kind of homemade meals, or maybe you do need to cook at a lower temperature for a longer duration to rehydrate something or cook something out there in the field, that's not something that I was concerned at all with. Maybe I should have been. Maybe that's something I'll do in the future, but as of right now, not the case.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty much the same way in use case. I'm also not looking too much at simmering. It can be nice to have. I'm not looking at, some of these stove options have better performance or more capabilities, or even some direct attachments for things like frying pans and things like that. I don't think that's either one of us are getting into that with that perspective for this review. So I'm essentially the same way, freaking make coffee and boil water to add to a dehydrated or freeze-dried meal, and that's about it. Not really out there heavy for season use, melting snow for drinking water, none of those considerations. So, I mean, we just want to get that out there up front, and I think like most guys are, I mean, the general use case is boil water for a meal, or, heat and or boil water for a drink. Small footprint's good, lightweight's good, quick boil times are freaking awesome. And so that's kind of where we're coming at this from. Like you, I've been using the Jetboil Soul TI. I've been using, got that same unit for 4-5 years, something like that. This would be the 5th year if I continue to use it. I think it's been awesome, been durable, been reliable, kind of no complaints really, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, I haven't personally had any issues with the titanium version of it. I know a lot of people have had where the flux ring thing on the bottom basically melts off the titanium pot at some point. I think that's been a pretty common issue, and I believe that's why they don't make it anymore. They probably got sick of warrantying that. So, yeah, sure, there's some guys out there that say, I had that stove and it was a piece of crap. But for me, for you, I know for Lenny, Jason did have it happen to him. He's got a second pot and it's been running strong for 3 years now. So,
was he just boiling water when he did that?
I believe he melted snow, which caused it to start that way. Yeah,
because I was going to say that's one of the things that I think they're pretty upfront with, but it's one of those deals where, if you read the fine print, they say essentially don't do anything but boil water with it. But obviously not. People are going to not read the fine print.
Yeah, and I know Lenny. One part of his flux ring's going off, and I think he had said he had put the stove on kind of crooked one day and didn't pay attention to it, and so the burner, the heat was directly on the flux rings. Yeah. And that's caused his to start to go a little bit, but other than that one little spot, other than that, it's doing fine. So,
yeah. So the Jetboil, the Soul TI specifically, at least for both of us, has kind of been a benchmark for the last several years. We're going to naturally make some comparisons to that, essentially because we've used it so stinking much. I will say that we don't have another Jetboil in this lineup. we reached out to them. They showed some interest, but at the same time, they didn't want to commit to the test. And I'm not going to throw them under the bus. They didn't come out and say this by any means, but I kind of got the impression in talking to them, they didn't necessarily want to be associated with hunting as much specifically and directly. I've kind of heard that about them in the past, but I'm going on hearsay. I'm going on my one interaction and reaching out to them and kind of talking to them about this project, whereas most brands were all for it. They were very hesitant and in the end did not want to participate, did not want to send any product for us to look at. So we didn't go out and purchase anything simply because we already had some. I know I have looked at their newer models, and to be honest with you, I'm personally not as interested in some of their newer stuff as I am how good the Soul TI has been for me anyway. So I do have a feeling that if I would have, picked up one of the new models, it kind of would have been a disappointment compared to what I was used to from them anyway. But also wanted to throw that out there, just being completely upfront,
Yeah, it's a bummer. I think there's a lot of companies that the majority of their sales is the backpacking industry, and unfortunately, certain people in that crowd would have a giant hissy fit if they were associated with hunters and make it like more trouble than it's worth for them. And there's other companies that don't, give a rat's ass and are definitely willing to work with hunters. So
yeah, and excited.
Unfortunate though. Yeah.
I mean, some of these companies are absolutely stoked. So
yeah, it's unfortunate.
Sure.
I don't know. I guess you could. It's tough to draw that line, I guess, of if they're not willing to support hunters, do you completely not use their product? That's a tough one.
So as we look at these, again, just kind of run down some of the things that we are considering, weight being a factor, and all gear, of course. Looking at the overall compactness of a stove setup, not only when it's packed in together, but once it's quote unquote deployed and in burn mode, kind of what kind of profile, what kind of footprint does it have? Things like, does it have built-in ignition or not can be helpful. I'm looking at things like not only how helpful is this pot to boil water in, but then how usable is that pot, for things like drinking out of. Does it have a good lid? Is it friendly to drink out of? Is it insulated and keep something warm, or is it going to, be in crazy hot and then all of a sudden cool really fast? Obviously, we're looking at performance in terms of boil time. I know that we've each done our own tests. So boil time with, I did room temperature water essentially in a controlled environment in my garage with kind of no wind, and then I did boil time in front of a fan, which I know that you did as well. Kind of any other big criteria that you were looking at when you look at these stoves, Steve?
No, yeah, I think that's it. It's the size of it, the ease of use, how fast it boils water, how efficiently it boils water, and that's the 3 tests I did were room temperature, wind, and we have a giant chest freezer in the warehouse, so I was able to put stoves in there for a couple hours and test how they did it. It was like 4 degrees inside there. And so that was actually very interesting. We'll get to the results. Not what I had all thought. So those are kind of the 3 criteria that I did: boil times and fuel efficiency. And by doing fuel efficiency, I just we've got a couple pretty precise scales. So I was measuring grams, measured a fuel canister before and after, and tells you basically how much lighter it is how much fuel it used up. So pretty easy to measure that. And again, some very surprising results. And then, same drinking out of it. You and I actually, through talking through this a little bit, we completely differ on our preferences there. But being able to heat up my coffee, pour my Starbucks Via packet in there and drink, that's definitely something that I do, probably more so during the day than I do boil water for a Mountain House meal or whatever it is.
Yeah, cool. Let's do this. Let's hit kind of the test results first. Talking about each one, however it stands out for good or for bad. Talk through each of those test results, and then maybe we'll just kind of run down the lineup of each stove afterwards and kind of, throw more of our opinion or experience in like we did with the headlamps, and give each one a rundown. So let's look at let's look at just standard boil time. So room temperature, no wind, just straight up boil powerhouse. Let's see how quick it can get it done. What kind of results were you seeing?
I guess we'll just start right at the top. Jet boil, hands down the winner. 1 minute, 14 seconds. That's with all the tests that I did off of 12 ounces of water. Most of my dehydrated meals require that, so I thought that, and that's about what I fill up if I'm going to make coffee. So I know boil times, I believe they do a liter, I believe anyways, on the published boil times that you'd see in advertising.
Yep. So you did 12. I actually did 16, so my boil times
16.
are a little bit higher,
Okay.
but yeah.
Gotcha. Well, at least you'll be able to compare, the results. So that's what I did. So jet boil 114, MSR surprised me at how slow it was at 144, and the Soto at 150. And then I did, I guess, did we mention the 4 stoves that we've got in the test? Or 5 for you.
Yeah, 5 for me, yeah, which I guess we can get there. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess we can mention those real quick. That's kind of
That'd
relevant.
be helpful.
Yeah. So MSR wind burner. We both use our jet boil Soul Titaniums. The Soto Windmaster. And then GSI sent us a stove, and I don't know the name of it.
Yeah, I don't know the name of the stove specifically. It comes with, they sent us the GSI Hall Light Minimalist Complete. And the stove is what comes with that complete kit, which we'll talk more about that kit. But yeah, GSI stove. And then Optimus kind of had a crunch in terms of products and the exact time we did this. They sent me a Crux Light, which I didn't get to pass on to you in the whole timing of things. So I had that 5th one into the mix as well.
Okay. And so the GSI stove was like 2 minutes and 20 something seconds to boil. The GSI, basically after that, I kind of stopped testing it because I knew it was going to be last place. I just kind of focused on the other 3. It's a fine stove. It works good. If that kit is a really nice, lightweight, compact kit, and there's some serious, nice features to it, which I know you like. But after that, I basically stopped testing that stove and just focused on the MSR, the jet boil, and the Soto because I could tell that those were going to be like the 3 potentials to take first place here.
Right. So yeah, my times obviously differed slightly because I had the 16 ounces, but my order was essentially the same. The jet boil was incredibly quick. It came in first place right along with that Optimus that, again, you didn't get to test, but the Optimus Crux Light. It was crazy fast as well. Those 2 were neck and neck on the boil time.
What? Cut you off real quick. What pot were you using with the Optimus Crux? Or does it come with a pot?
It came with a pot. So it came with their Optimus Electra FE pot, which has kind of an integrated, the Flux style design on the bottom of that. It's a larger, kind of shorter and wider pot. It has a larger capacity than the jet boil did, about the same as the MSR, but it's kind of a shorter, fatter design. So I don't know if that helped to disperse, because it's essentially dispersing a wider array at that point. But trying not to crazy jump out of order, I tested that stove with the GSI pot as well, and it was also incredibly quick. But yeah, it performed really well. So it was kind of the Crux Light and the jet boil were neck and neck. The MSR was a bit behind them, not incredibly, but somewhere in the neighborhood of say like 10 seconds for my 16 ounces, 8 to 10 seconds. The Soto was just a little bit behind the MSR, and for me the GSI was even worse. It was even slower. I don't know if it was making that jump to boil 16 ounces, but the GSI was dog slow, the stove itself. So yeah, that's kind of where things ended up for me. Again, just to run down the standard boil, jet boil and Optimus really fast, MSR 8 to 10 seconds. I kind of did a couple tests there. And then the Soto, another, like maybe 4 to 6 seconds behind the MSR for me.
Yeah. Okay.
So wind, we'll hit that one. We kind of did 2 different approaches there. I just had a small-ish fan, maybe like 10-inch diameter fan, and had it, I believe, on medium. I know you took a different approach. Did you say you ran like the big commercial shop fan
Yeah,
at these
we got
guys?
a big shop fan, like a 36-inch fan, so it was blowing pretty hard for sure. I definitely kind of envision being, up on a ridge glassing or something like that, and maybe it's in the evening you're gonna make your dehydrated meal then, or you're trying to make coffee or whatever. Just totally exposed to the wind, and I didn't have a wind meter with me, but it was blowing pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, what were your results with that guy?
MSR smokes everything. Wind burner is appropriately named. It was really impressive. So it only added 16 seconds to the boil time. So it went from an average of 144 to an average of 2 minutes to boil in that crazy wind. The jet boil surprised me in that it was double. It was average of 4 minutes to get water boiling. Really surprised me. I did not, because it's not near as an exposed flame as like the Soto or the GSI stove would be, and I thought it was going to do better than that. And then Soto came in third at an average of 4 minutes and 44 seconds. So really the MSR hands down the clear winner here. For me, it's well, we'll get into it later, I guess, talking about the pros and cons of all these stoves. So
yeah, this one was a little bit interesting to test, and I would echo your experience, Steve. I mean, the MSR wind burner, I mean, there's nothing else to say other than the fact that it's freaking aptly named. When you look at this stove, it takes a much different approach in terms of how the heating element is designed, how it's surrounded, how it's actually applying that heat. And it's incredibly, incredibly effective in the wind. At this point, kind of in my testing, there's these distinctions that make themselves very apparent. And you take a stove like the MSR and the jet boil, kind of these all-in-one systems, and then you start looking at something like the Soto, the Optimus Cruxlite, the GSI stove. Those three, each the stoves themselves, not talking about their cook pots, but they're not meant to be part of this integrated system like a jet boil or like an MSR. You're essentially taking the stove, screwing it on, choose your pot. You can choose a pot from them or a pot from somebody else, but there's no wind protection at that point. They're all three taking a similar approach in the flame. And so to really test these in wind, it's, if you're testing them without zero, wind protection, they're gonna take a severe hit. I mean, there's no other way around it, right? Harkening back to what you mentioned with your old setup with a stove like this, taking something like a couple, a sheet of aluminum foil, folding it over a couple times, using that as like a windscreen can actually be pretty effective. And so I did some tests with and without that. And we can kind of talk more about that, I think, in the pros and cons of the setups. But overall, the big takeaway from me was exactly what you said. The MSR wind burner is incredibly effective, as is. The jet boil suffered a bit more than I thought it would. And then going into testing the other independent stoves, it was kind of like, yeah, I mean, they slowed down significantly, but that's what you expect if you're going to use an open flame stove with zero windscreen around it.
Yep.
So
yeah, spot on.
Yeah, I'm super interested to hear your freezer test because I did not get to do this, so I'm like stoked to hear what happened.
Right. Yeah. So the first, actually, only did this test twice. So the first time I put the stoves in there, put the pots on it, so everything was cold. But the water I took from the faucet, poured it. And leveled it out and let it sit at room temperature for 3-4 hours. So it was, identical temperatures. And then I opened up the freezer, poured the water in and clicked everything on. Like I said, it was like 4 degrees, and we had Rob had a Suunto watch there that just gave us the temperature. So it was 4 degrees in there, and it got up to 10 degrees at the watch by the time the boil was done. So between the heat of the stoves and opening up the lid, it increased 6 degrees. But it's it's a realistic late season hunting temperature. I mean, that's freaking cold and miserable, but something we're all at one point or another going to encounter. So this is where shocked me. The Soto, 2 minutes and 5 seconds. To boil.
Really?
Yep. 2 minutes and 5 seconds. Jet boil, 2 minutes, 45 seconds. And MSR just complete dud at 4 minutes and 44 seconds.
Wow.
Like the MSR, like it just couldn't get going. It was really weird. However, the heating element works and that extreme cold temperature, it just like literally like halfway through it, once the other ones had boiled and we were probably like, maybe close to 3 minutes, I picked the pot up and like, is the burner still going? Because it was like the water was just like it didn't even look like it was like close to boiling. So really, really interesting. The one thing I'll say about the Soto is every time you unscrew the stove from the fuel canister, you get a really good pop of fuel, that pressure release. So I don't know if there's something in that connection that it just gets really gets a good pressurization from the fuel canister to push through there. I know that's, I've never done this testing before. It's always just been real world, like, oh, my stove worked or it didn't work that great today, and you don't really know one way or the other. And so, yeah, I was really surprised by that. Jet boil, I said it was 2 minutes and 45 seconds. Just kind of steady Eddie there. Like it didn't do, basically, I guess a minute and a half slower than boiling at room temperature, but nothing too crazy. So
yeah, but I mean that's a pretty solid boil time for that condition.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, right.
And then I said the MSR was just way, way, way behind. One thing that was interesting, I'll get to this in a sec. So the next test, I filled all the pots up with water, and let them sit in there for like 2.5 hours roughly. And so when I went to open the lid, like the top 1/4 inch was frozen. And again, this is something I do just because I'm so stinking lazy when I'm hunting in the mornings is I have my coffee like ready to go. So all I gotta do is wake up, roll over and click on the stove, and the sound of that stove going and knowing I got hot coffee waiting for me just gets me out of bed. So I like to have the water in there ready to go. Again, a realistic scenario, it just got crazy cold. The stove froze over a little bit or the water froze in there. I've had that happen before. So water's frozen, turn it on. I got opposite results this time, which didn't make sense between the Soto and the jet boil. Jet boil was the fastest, dramatic increase to 6 minutes and 50 seconds. The Soto, 8 minutes, pretty much even. And then the MSR, 9 minutes and 45 seconds. So it was the jet boil and Soto flipped around. I can't explain that. I don't know. I need to I almost want to do the test a third time to see if one of the results out of the two was an error, or for some reason. One thing to mention: these are all brand new full canisters. Mm-hmm. I know that the results I think would get worse the lower that canister gets on fuel, because it's less pressure in there. So. But again, so jet boil Soto, they had flipped around a little bit. MSR was really, really slow, really struggled on this test. And yeah, it was super interesting. What I was going to say on the MSR was what shocked me is when I went to weigh the grams of fuel that it used, it wasn't like double of what it should have been. It was only like 9 grams of fuel. Which, like, in comparison to the runtime, it should have been a lot higher than that. So there's something going on in the regulator of that it's like it's not getting the fuel to the burner to burn up, and that's what's causing the boil times to be so slow. So yeah. Not sure exactly what's going on there, but it's definitely slow.
Yeah, I mean, that's a super valid point, though. I mean, you would think that as the runtime increases, the consumption would increase in kind. Right. But that, I mean, exactly what you said, in this condition, the runtime increased, but maybe it was taking so long simply because it couldn't transport that fuel and run, with full capacity and efficiency.
Something going on in the design of it that it's not getting the fuel to it. Because, it wasn't everything else at room temperature. The boil time to the fuel consumption per each stove was pretty much spot on. So jet boil is hands down the most efficient. The Soto and MSR were pretty much neck and neck, other than, I guess, the wind test where the wind burner kicked ass.
What kind of differences did you see, Steven, just the standard boil, not the wind, not the cold, but did you see any big variances in terms of fuel consumption? Because we didn't really hit that yet.
Um, no, yeah, let's see. So I'm looking at 3 grams of fuel at jet boil at room temperature, no wind, and then in the extreme cold test, it used 5 grams. Um, so again, the ratio doesn't add up on that one either. It's 4 times the length or 4 times the duration, but it's not 4 times the fuel consumption. Um, so that I said in general, the MSR took about 5 grams at room temperature, jet boil 3 grams, and the soda was right between. It was like 5.5 grams. So jet boil is most efficient. MSR soda really neck and neck as far as fuel efficiency goes at room temp, and then wind. Obviously, the MSR is going to kick butt. It's going to use the exact same 5 grams. Jet boil went up to 8 grams, and then the soda in the wind test did 15 grams. So it was really sucking up fuel.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I was kind of surprised. I had similar results again, but I was surprised that out of the 5 stoves I tested for the standard boil, there was some variance, but there wasn't a huge amount of variance, right? I mean, all these stoves seem to be within, for the most part, 1 to 2. The outlier was a bit more, but, these top stoves, the top 3, 4, between 1 gram and 2 per boil. And, I just began to question fuel efficiency in general. I mean, I've always thought that the jet boil was incredibly fuel efficient, but it was kind of nice to see some of these other ones, be within the same range of that and not be dramatically different.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I said I'm looking at jet boil at 3 grams and the soda at 5.5 on that was my average. So it's, it's 2.5 grams, which is
almost double at that point.
Almost double in the life of a small canister, which is what I've personally experienced in the field with the jet boil versus my old Brunton stove that I used to use, which that thing sucked up fuel like crazy. I mean, it put out some crazy, high, like 10,000 BTUs or, some stupid number. And it was, if I did a hunt more than, I think 3 nights, 4 days, I needed to pack a second canister with me. Or the jet boil, I can go 1 week on a canister. So definitely, weight savings there. Yeah, and cost savings.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to pay attention to. I'm gonna take something other than the jet boil into the field this year, so it'll be an interesting test as I use it for the same duration of a hunt to see how fuel compares, in these real world scenarios, and essentially see, okay, I know how many days, how many boils, how many meals, how many coffees I got out of a canister with my jet boil. Let's see how this stacks up versus just me trying to throw stuff on a scale and weigh a comparison for a single boil time.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Any other takeaways from the testing itself before we dive straight into talking about each of these?
No, I think that's about it. Yeah, just kind of covering the extreme cold and the efficiency, and yeah, I guess that's it.
Cool.
We'll get into the rest of the details.
Yeah. So the jet boil's a top performer, as we thought. The wind burner from MSR is a great performer in the wind, and then kind of some prizes from the cold. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Good deal. All right, let's hit this in alphabetical order again and just take it as it goes. First up would be the GSI. So we kind of talked about the stove itself. It was slow. It was really slow. I mean, you mentioned you quit testing yours after kind of the initial standard boil. I did test mine in the wind and almost got so impatient that I just like, forget this. Yeah. But to not completely trash the GSI. So again, I kind of mentioned the stove came with the GSI Halite Minimalist Complete. So it's the stove, it's a pot with an insulated sleeve that goes on and off. It's a lid. It comes with it came with a spoon, actually, which I didn't care about. But anyway, so it's this complete kit. I absolutely really dig the cook set that it came with. The stove, by no means, but the cook set I really like. It's incredibly small. It's lightweight, easy to use. I like the fact that, so it's an aluminum pot. it has an insulated kind of cozy that slips on and off. So you obviously have it off when you are boiling, but you can then take it straight off the boil, drop it into the insulated koozie if you want to keep something warm, which is a nice option to have. And then that way, I mean, straight from, going on the stove, dropping it in the koozie, you can then handle it. You can pick it up by hand, keep a drink warm, what have you. It's the same type of material that, is on the outside of the jet boil, for example. The one thing I didn't like about it that stands out is there's no graduated markers inside the pot in terms of ounces as you're filling it up or milliliters.
Which was way more annoying than you'd think it'd be. I mean, I guess for me it was just like, oh yeah, whatever. And then literally as I was trying to do all these tests and figured, anyways, jet boil and MSR apparently don't know how to measure 12 ounces of fuel the same because they're different measurements.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. But yeah, not having that in the GSI was super frustrating at first because at first I just filled them all up with 12 and then kind of quickly realized, oh wait, this is different capacity. But annoying for sure. And it's something I use on my jet boil every single time I pour 12 ounces of water in there to make a heat up water.
Yeah, I'm kind of torn with it because I don't know. It's funny for me because with drinks, I just eyeball it anyway. And then with meals, like with Mountain House, I kind of follow the directions, but the more and more that I've gotten into doing my own dehydrated meals, I don't have a prescription for how much water goes in that. No one's telling me, right? And I don't know. And so I've done some things where kind of 1-to-1, I will kind of see the volume of the dry goods before I pack them and say, oh, like this is a cup or a cup and a half or what have you. And then, some people say to do like a 1-to-1 ratio, so I'll do that much water. But the more and more that I've tested meals, I kind of add the water by eye and kind of by feel, knowing and anticipating how much water is going to be, rehydrated into that meal. So for me, it's like, it is annoying. I don't like, they should totally be there, but at the same time, I don't know. Like I can see how some people won't care and some people it's going to be a total deal breaker. But it's a cool little kit. I've enjoyed using it not only to boil water, I've enjoyed drinking the drinks out of it. If you can get it with a stove and a fuel canister and everything inside of it, it's like by far and away the smallest total packed footprint that you're going to have. It beats the jet boil, beats the MSR wind burner for sure. It beats the cook set that came with the Crux Lite, the Optimus Electrica FE. So it's a cool option. I'll talk a bit more about it down the road, but that's that. Next up, if we consider the jet boil, we've kind of already talked about it, would be the jet boil. Do you want to say anything more there, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, I love, I do really like integrated stove fuel setups, so the MSR and the wind burner, and there's a few others on the market as far as screwing together. Unfortunately, so with the jet boil, the titanium version no longer exists, so that's like everything we use for this testing is kind of, unfortunately, we did it for our own good, and if I was to go out and buy one today, jet boil has, they have their Minimo, and they have, they have one called the Light, Flashlight.
Yeah,
maybe?
The Flash, I think it's still the Flash around, yeah.
So the Flashlight, I believe, is like 12 ounces. And so it's not that, it's about the same as the old Soul aluminum. I did hear from a few sources that are using the new jet boil that their new burner, they have a new regulator on them, is supposed to be even more efficient. So that would have been nice to test, but again, so jet boil didn't want to support this, unfortunately. So, jet boil's solid, man. It's a great stove. It's a great cup. Everything just works really well. It's not comparing it head to head with MSR. Like if I had to pick one that I was going to throw off a cliff and roll down a mountain, that's the MSR. It's definitely more stoutly built, but again, I don't need I just need a stove to boil water fast and efficiently, and the jet boil does that for me. So, and then I guess we'll hit on I'm a huge titanium fan. because I like to be able to heat up my coffee and then immediately that titanium cools down within 15 seconds that you can put your lip on that top thing and drink right from it. That's where I hate the aluminum because it holds that heat forever.
Yeah, but who wants to keep their coffee warm? That's ludicrous.
Right? But you can't drink from it. So, I mean, I like
if you have a lid, like with the built-in lid with the GSI, freaking insulated, cozy, you can hold it, you can drink it, it stays warm. You're not drinking cold coffee 4 minutes into your glassing session.
I burn the crap out of my lips with those lids, man. I don't know what it is, but it seems like the liquid's always too hot, and then you just go to test it out and freaking burn your freaking mouth. So that's where I like the titanium. You know, you can kind of just, you know, see it coming and drink it and sip on it. And you do, for sure. There's plenty of times I've put the coffee back on the stove and reheated it for about 10 seconds to get it warm again.
And lost all the fuel efficiency benefits of your jet boil. No wonder you need it to be so fuel efficient, because you reheat your coffee 4 times to drink a cup.
That's definitely, yeah, I guess that's a valid argument.
That's funny.
Other than that, yeah, JetBoil is solid, man. The PZO igniter, a lot of guys knock it. Most people don't know that there's a little white wire that feeds up to it, and once your igniter stops working well, you just grab a pair of pliers, pull like an extra 1/16 of wire out, snip off the old stuff, and you're good to go again. It works for, you know, you can do that 5 or 6 times before the wire gets too tight. You can't stretch it any further. But that's a quick, simple fix. One thing that I really, I guess we haven't got to the Optimus stove, but their igniter is awesome.
Yeah. Yep. All right, let's hit it. Next up, going off medical, would be the Windburner. It's another integrated system. I mean, like you said, it's solid. It's well built. It's obviously incredibly effective in the wind, which we've talked about. So it's not going to be the smallest option, not going to be the lightest option, not going to be the cheapest option. But it's a freaking stout. I have a feeling, you know, over the couple months I've been testing, I can't speak to long term, but I have a feeling it'd be incredibly reliable in terms of just taking backcountry use in a variety of conditions. Again, I mean, it's just a good system. It has a pretty decent lid on it, has a strainer integrated. I like the fact that there's other accessories. You know, they have a coffee press that fits right into their pot. You can run that if you want to get all coffee snob in the backcountry and go French press. You could do that. You can get different size pots for their system. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of a versatile platform. I think they're one of the companies, I believe, might even make a frying pan that like literally attaches directly to that stove base. You know, I mentioned it's not the smallest and that's the only one packed up, but when you get the stove out, get it screwed onto the fuel canister, get the pot on, get the whole system going, it does feel pretty freaking tall. You know, the burner element has a bit more vertical to it than even like the jet boil. So it is pretty tall for sure. Didn't notice, you know, that it would necessarily be super unstable being an integrated unit, but there's definitely some heights to it. But yeah, I mean, it's, you know, it's like, it's one of those stoves I look at and I go, okay, I know it's not the lightest, but it works freaking well. It seems like it would hold up. And it just seems like just a solid option. If wind is a concern, like at all, if I was hunting, you know, sheep country, super high, super exposed stuff, wanted something dead reliable, I would definitely be considering this guy.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm in the same boat. The size and weight of it are definitely a hindrance. And again, yeah, I totally agree. Like sheep country, awesome, except for how terrible it did in the cold test. Because I'm sure, you know, up sheep hunting, you're going to hit some extreme cold temperatures at one point. So that was the only really big downside to it, obviously. But other than that, it's you know, it's a great stove. I was super impressed with it. Not having an igniter drives me absolutely nuts. I think for you, it's not a big deal. For other guys, it's not a big deal at all. Well, I'm so used to having it that, like I mean, I've been packing around that MSR since we got these in April, so it's been 4 months, and I've used it on lots of different trips, whether it's just car camping or backpacking and scouting, and it's just freaking annoying every time. I guess I haven't got it to where like the lighter is always like somehow a part of the stove or in the stove because I got to go dig out my first aid kit, or I took it to the Stevens Pass or the Hoodoo archery shoot, and I remember like I had my jet boil, so I'd light my jet boil to get the fuel going, and I was doing some tests, then I'd have to use the fuel or the flame from that to get the MSR lit, and I was just like, what a pain in the ass. So I know the igniters aren't perfect. They do fail at one point or another. There's, with the jet boil, you can fix that for a certain duration. But man, they sure are nice when they work.
Yeah. And it's one of those things I'd be more inclined to overlook it if it was like this super stripped, super minimal option.
Yeah.
But I feel like for the weight and for the size, it kind of should have the igniter along with it. You're right. Yeah. I mean, it's it
may not. Sorry to cut you off, but it may not ignite. That'd be interesting to test. Because I don't know if you know, it takes a second to get that thing lit.
Right.
Because it's a different style of burner. I think it's like more of a radiant type heat.
Exactly.
But I wonder if an igniter just flat out wouldn't work. Maybe that's the reason they don't have it.
Yeah, that is a good point. Yeah, I mean, for you guys who haven't seen one, it's not kind of the direct flame jets that you're used to with a jet boil or something else. It has like this kind of like wire mesh burning element under the pot.
Most guys are probably seeing like a Mr. Heater, a propane heater, like 8-inch circle. That's what it is, just, a 3-inch circle.
Yep. Yeah, right under the pot. Yeah. Cool. So, yeah, that's the MSR. Next up would be the Optimus. So I've kind of mentioned they sent the Electrica FE. That was kind of their pot that came with it. It has that kind of flex style, jet boil style burner on the bottom of the pot. It doesn't securely mount to the Crux Light stove, the Optimus Crux Light. It just sits on top of the Crux Light. The Electrica FE also came with kind of a clip-on windscreen. I was not a big fan of the pot or the windscreen, kind of just big, bulky. The pot was efficient. I mean, I think it performed well. I think it transferred heat really well. But I don't know, just the profile of it, the packed profile, and then the windscreen especially, it was not effective. But I absolutely love the Crux Light stove. It's incredibly fast. I mean, like I said, with the standard boil, it was right up there for me with the jet boil in terms of performance. It does have a decent adjustable burner on it, so I could get it down to some simmer style flames. I know that we said that wasn't a huge concern for us, but I was just kind of interested. It wasn't always incredibly easy to do that. It means a little bit finicky, but it's capable of kind of running at those speeds, if you will. Again, it doesn't have a built-in igniter on this guy either, but it does come with a clicker style igniter, which is kind of handy, not having it necessarily stuck and built into the stove, but kind of you're able to freehand it and click, and that works incredibly well. It fits in with the pot or within other pots. So again, huge fan of the Optimus stove, not at all a fan of the Electrica FE cookset and pot. They do have other pot options. So really, it's kind of the exact opposite of the GSI. I loved the pot, loved the cookset, didn't like the stove at all. On the Optimus, I love the stove, not a huge fan of the pot or the cookset at all. That leaves us with the Soto stove. So Steve, you want to tackle that one, the Soto Windmaster?
Yeah, I was when it first showed up, I was super impressed with it. Overall build quality. From them, we just got a stove. There was no pot or anything that came with it. It's like kind of tall for what it is, but from what I'm used to, like my old Brunton stove or MSR pocket rocket, something like that. It's got a pretty tall stance to it. The igniter is really impressive. Just that you look at it, and you can tell it's like gonna last a long time. It's like this really stout kind of metal piece that overhangs. The one thing that I thought at first was super hokey and was gonna drive me freaking nuts was the actual pot support arms. you have to take them on and off the stove every single time. They kind of clip onto the side of it. And again, I thought that was just going to be like, I was just like, what a POS. You got to do this every single time. I've used that stove a lot, and once you kind of start using it, it wasn't an issue at all. It takes about 2 seconds to pop it on there. And it's got an interesting design. It's kind of got this convex shape to the outside of the burner, and then the actual flame versus some other open flame style stoves sits like, maybe an 3/16 of an inch below the bottom of the pot. So between the shape of the bottom of the burner and then the flame being really close, I believe that's why they call it their Windmaster, because wind is harder to cut through there. In all reality, we did our wind test, and it didn't perform that phenomenal. I didn't test it against other open flame stoves. I guess I don't know how how close that flame is to the bottom of the pot.
Yeah, I mean, it's decent. It's pretty close. It's not as close as the
Okay.
Soto. But yeah, I mean, they both took a hit. Let me try and dig my paper on the Soto. And yeah, I mean, there wasn't a huge variance based off of my notes. Again, kind of going back to the whole issue of testing it without a windscreen. I just felt like on all three of those, I'm like weighing the relevance of that, since there's no protection.
Yeah.
I mean, like you said, the proximity to the pot, I think, can help for sure. That also goes back to, getting into minute details, such as the direction of the wind. Is it coming kind of top down? That could not give as much exposure and things like that. But it for the open flame stoves, it was one of the top performer, really.
Gotcha.
I mean, the Optimus, talking no protection, wasn't very far behind it. The GSI again was quite slow, but yeah, I think there's some effectiveness to that in terms of how they have that design with that convex shape.
So yeah, other than that, super impressed with it. It's a really good, lightweight, compact stove. I really have no issues with it. It performs really well. It's only a few seconds behind the MSR and boil times at room temperature. It was either first or second in the two freezing tests, and then the wind test, it was miserable. Like you said, you're gonna have some type of wind protection. You're gonna make it, basically, whether if you're in fact, I just was scouting for deer last Saturday night, took it with me, and I was making my coffee in the morning, and it wasn't all that windy, but I was packing up camp and letting that run, and I could just hear, like, you kind of hear the wind blow out the flame, almost kind of like a just that sound of the wind blowing through there, and then it kicks back on. And I heard that twice, and then I kind of just went over and put it behind my pack, so my pack was blocking the wind, and basically it was not an issue. So I think the benefits of the Windmaster are there, but it's not so much so that when you're using a different style stove that you're SOL, you just kind of find a way to work around it. You put it on the opposite side of your body, the way the wind's blowing, or behind your pack, or behind a rock, or in your tent, in your tent vestibule, whatever. So really great option. It's if you are counting ounces and grams, I definitely the build quality and burn time and everything, I was very impressed.
Yeah, I'm like you. I mean, it's just a freaking solid stove. That the supports take a little bit of getting used to. They are swappable. At least the one that we have, you can kind of choose from a 3-leg or 4-leg support. The built-in igniter is a great option and a really good performer. Just overall, like, it's not one of these stoves you look at and it has some sort of like sex appeal or like marketing, like awesomeness to it, but you just look at it and go, that looks like an engineer built it, and it looks like it's going to work incredibly well, and it does. So I mean, yeah, it's absolutely a solid option. My main thing with it is kind of the height. Like, it seems tall for what it is, and depending upon how you want to pack it, what kind of pot you might be packing it in, I could see how the length could interfere with trying to cram it and a pot and, it and a fuel canister and some other things into a super small pot, if that's the route you're going. If not, might not be a big deal at all, you know?
Yeah, so I was running it. It did fit inside the GSI pot, sideways. So
Okay.
I would put the fuel canister first, put the pot support, like stuff it down to the side of the fuel canister. You kind of had to like put a little bit of an angle so the lid would fit on, and then the stove would fit in there sideways. It's a nice, tight, snug fit, which is frankly what you want.
Preferable.
Nothing once you
Yeah.
put that lid on, nothing rattled or made any noise. It was solid.
Yeah. There you go. Sweet. So do you have a big surprise or a big takeaway or a big shakeup? I mean,
Yeah.
you leave the jet boil at home more now, or what's kind of the big takeaway for you?
This is not the answer I thought I was going to say when I was going into this test. But my personal opinion, after looking at all the pros and cons and features and boil times and efficiency, it doesn't matter. That's it doesn't matter. That's my
Love it.
opinion. There's pros and cons. There wasn't a clear winner by any means. I think if you averaged out all the tests, I think the jet boil titanium is when you consider the weight, but the fact that you can't get the titanium version anymore. The new version's 12.5 ounces. It replaces it from, I think the titanium's 8.5 or 9 ounces. So if the Soul Titanium still existed, I think that'd be the winner, but not like a huge margin. MSR, very impressed with the build quality, extremely impressed with how well it does with wind. Again, maybe the simmer feature is fantastic. That's not something that we were testing. But it's heavy and it's tall. And so one thing, and I just did this like 2 weeks ago, the Soto stove with the GSI pot and 2 full fuel canisters. So offset all your fuel efficiency there. Granted, you're going to pay more money for fuel canisters over the lifetime, but to start out with, you're saving money on the stove. Is still 2 ounces lighter than the wind burner with 1 full canister. So if you're going MSR or the Soto GSI pot combo and you're worried about weight, you're actually saving weight with the GSI Soto version, which was kind of shocking to me. Just that 15.5 ounces of the MSR stove really offsets that quite a bit. I really like a lot of stuff about the Soto. I like the compactness in that GSI pot. I mean, it's like, I've got a bunch of photos we'll have you post up with the blog notes. But it's substantially smaller than the jet boil, and the jet boil's, a good bit smaller than the MSR stove. So I really like the compactness and the weight of that, me being a weight weenie. Before we did the cold test, I thought if there was a titanium stripped down version of the MSR, that would be the clear winner. But they'd have to redesign that burner somehow to do better in the extreme cold temps now. So I really pick your poison. What kind of features do you want? Are you hunting in extremely windy conditions up in Alaska or somewhere? MSR. If you're just looking for an awesome fuel efficient all around stove, the jet boil. If you're a minimalist and you're counting ounces and grams, I used to think, prior to this testing, that the jet boil was the winner just because it was so fuel efficient. But, you could, if you're not doing like long trips, if you're doing those 3-day trips, you could easily get by with 1 small fuel canister in that Soto stove and have a setup that weighs, I think it was like 7.6 ounces, it was crazy light. So pick your poison. Nobody has bragging rights here, in my opinion, because there isn't any. Nobody's a clear winner.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I don't think, I think the only way to say that there's a clear winner is to simply lean upon your preference, or lean upon a very specific use case, such as, in the wind, a wind burner takes it, right? But we're not just always testing on that criteria, or I really value X, so this is the best stove. I mean, that's the only way to say that that's the case. For me, I fell in love with that GSI Howlite Mini or Minimal. not with the stove, obviously, which we've covered. I really dig in the Optimus stove, although the Soto is great as well. And I'm surprised to be kind of considering going back to more of this freestanding kit, not the integrated system like I have had with the Jetboil. But like you, I mean, it's so small, so light. And for me and for my needs, it's really small and really light without giving up on performance that matters. So for me, you know, the Optimus is a great little stove, incredibly fast performer. I can get the Optimus with the GSI kit, you know, with a homemade windscreen, with everything all in there, with the external igniter if you go that route, or if you go with Soto, you don't need the external igniter. You know, everything all and above in the smallest kit at the smallest weight without giving up performance. So to have this small footprint, to be sub 10 ounces, depending on how you configure it, it makes it tough to pick up something like the wind burner that's going to be more like 16 ounces, have a much bigger footprint, not only in use, but in your pack. And yeah, you're gaining wind efficiency with the wind burner, but I feel like, at least for the country I hunt, the style of hunting I do, like you said, throwing it in your pack, using my homemade windscreen, using my shelter, something else like that. I'm just flat out not sitting in super high exposure at high wind for the majority of a trip. So for me, I mean, that's, you know, I'm going to be trying this kit with the GSI Howlite Minimalist kit, the Optimus Crux Light stove. The other thing to mention on that, not only is the smallest and lightest, it's, you know, pretty much the cheapest option, definitely much cheaper than a Jetboil integrated stove, cheaper than the MSR. So you can pick up the GSI Howlite kit, not with the stove, just the cook set and all that stuff that we've been talking about, with something like the Optimus Crux Light. You could be in it for like $65-$70 easy to your door right now for, like, you know, again, 10 ounces, incredibly small, affordable. I just don't see that unless you have a specific use case where you need something else. Man, it's just freaking tough for the weight, for the performance, for the price. It's what I'm going to be going with for sure this fall.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to hear your experience after a season of putting it to use. Yeah, I know for me, I think I'm going to continue to use all of them and hopefully flesh out a winner at some point. You know, if it's a trip where it's like overnight and I'm not worried about weight and I got some extra capacity in my pack, I'll take the MSR. If I want to go ultra light and, you know, I'm going in solo somewhere, I'll take the Soto with the GSI, and then, you know, we're leaving for Alaska here pretty dang quick, and I'll probably take a Jetboil with me just for sheer fuel efficiency to make sure that I'm getting the most boils out of the one canister as I possibly can. So, yeah, it was really fun to do this test. You know, it's always it's one thing to read about specs and, you know, hear references, but to actually do real world tests and side by side and get to play with them, you know, just like the headlamp tests we did. It's just flat out fun to do and interesting, the results that pop up. Definitely not what I expected. I'm a Jetboil fan. Really bummed they didn't want to send us one and support this, but still, I've always been a fan of it. It works well, and at the end to come out and go, well, maybe there is other options. I know personally, I've been looking for a titanium stove or titanium pot that's the exact same dimensions as that GSI pot, because I think that would be a killer setup. We do a lot of late season hunts where I'm just like day hunting for mule deer, and to be able to throw that tiny lightweight package in my pack just to heat up coffee, you know, when it's like late morning and you're sitting there glassing, freaking awesome.
Yeah.
So
See, that's...
I think I think I'm going to continue to use all of them, and
right.
and eventually I may kind of find a preference for one, but
yeah. I mean, it's funny because, like, I've used just stripped down titanium pots in the past. That's what I used pre-Jetboil. But most of those that I've found, and I'm saying this because I'm interested to see what you find as you look, Steve. Most of those have, they have like handles, fold-out handles on them. And for me, those always feel kind of dumb, especially when you're pouring the full thing of water. It just never feels fully stable or things like that for me. And then again, kind of going back to that hot to cold issue, it's like it allows it to cool down to drink from, but then for me it gets cold too fast. So I kind of dig that the GSI, you can drop it in the insulated sleeve. You don't have to deal with these goofy handles, and then it keeps it warm. But I agree that, I could see how you're looking for something like that that's even more streamlined. It's funny that the kind of your overall consensus is from this kind of that it doesn't matter, and at the same time you're still continuing to look for something.
Yeah, that's a good point, huh?
Yeah.
There's
But,
always something out there on the horizon.
I was going to say, I know you well enough
yet.
just to know that that's how it's always going to be, I think.
Right. Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very
Cool.
few products that I just it's like, oh, nope, I'm happy. Well, Jetboil up until now, I was totally happy with and content, and I wasn't looking at anything new, and this kind of reopened my eyes. So,
Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool. Well, it'll be fun, listeners. Again, reach out anytime if you have any questions we can help with on any of these. Shoot us an email, and as Steve said, we'll continue to test them. I mean, we can wrap back up and hear how things go after this hunting season, or maybe we change our mind, things like that. So, we will for sure eat our words, or happily, change our opinions based on continued use and testing. That's for sure.
Yeah, I said I got no pride here, man. It's I'll take whatever is the best into the field with me that I can find, and if something surprises me, it is what it is. So,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Cool. Well, listeners, again, if you have questions, podcast at exomountaingear.com is how you can catch us. Besides that, hope to catch you guys on the next episode. Well, once again, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Hope that this stove review is helpful for you, as well as the headlamp review. As we mentioned previously, we are going to get into some great elk content in the next few episodes that are going to be so timely and so helpful for your upcoming hunts. So be sure to subscribe. Go to exomountaingear.com/podcast. That has all the links, all the information you need to make sure that you don't miss future episodes. Also has the contact information if you want to contact us with any other questions, comments, or feedback. Again, thank you guys for tuning in. We will catch you next week.